I'm Raymond, and you're watching RPadTV. Tonight's show is all about Star Wars: The Acolyte Season 1. To review, discuss, and dissect this new Star Wars show, which is really quite different and probably the most divisive Star Wars show on the Disney Plus channel, I enlisted the help of excellent friend and excellent video game journalist Paul Semel. Hello, Paul.
Greetings, Earthlings.
When last you were on, which was only last week, you were still recovering from COVID. How are things now?
I'm much better.
Excellent.
Although today I had lunch with the groom, who told me that everybody at the wedding got COVID, so I no longer feel unique.
Was that the wedding theme?
Yeah, apparently, yeah. The COVID wedding. They couldn't go red wedding, so they went COVID wedding.
Red wedding? Well, if it was the red wedding, we wouldn't be talking.
No. Well, unless I was the one who killed everybody. I mean, some people
probably still wouldn't be talking because you'd be in jail, hopefully.
No, it happened in England. I got away. I got to get out of there scot-free. So, anyway.
And so I definitely want to get your thoughts and opinions on Star Wars: The Acolyte, of which I'm sure you have a lot of. But before we get into that, and give the people out there an update on what's going on paulsemel.com.
Same old. We really should come up with a better way to say that. A lot of book stories this week. A lot of good book stories next week. Some interesting ones, as always. I have props. At some point next week, I think Wednesday, Rob Brenzetti's The Twisted Tower of Endless Torment. Interviewed this guy. He is actually a guy that he worked on such cartoons as Dexter's Laboratory. Oh, and cool. So, but he writes middle grade horror novels. So he's trying to scare the little kids. And this is the second book of, there's going to be 3. And basically somebody drops off in the first book, someone drops off a bag at this kid's house, and out jumps this thing that's kind of half spider, half dust bunny, grabs his sister, drags her into the bag, and so he jumps into the bag to follow her. And
so that scenario sounds terrifying. So are there horror elements in this book?
It is a horror story. It's supposed to be scary, but it's also got humor. The thing that he kind of likened it to that I thought was interesting was the Lemony Snicket books. Which I don't know if you ever saw the TV show or read the books or read the movies, but there was definitely like an Edgar Allan Poe-esque darkness.
It's very depressing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's the saddest tree I've ever seen in my life.
Right. And there were some scary elements to that, but it was never, it was not like The Exorcist or The Omen or anything.
Yeah.
It was very like, scary-ish for 8 to 10-year-olds. And that's what he's going for.
So it'll scare kids, but not traumatize them.
Yeah.
Can you hold up the cover again? So the way my brain works, what I saw was like, what? The titty twister of endless torment? Like,
I think that's just more about you than it does about me.
It does.
And then the other book that I got a big interview with, Sean Hamill, The Dissonance, which is basically it sort of reminds me of It in a way, except that instead of finding a scary clown, these kids find some magic that works off sort of negative emotions. And it sort of follows them as they get the magic and they're like, "Woo, cool, we can do stuff with it." And then of course, as you can imagine, some of them don't exactly use them for good. So that book seems rather interesting. So both of those interviews will be up next week, along with a couple others if they come in. So
is this something you do in the summer? Do you like to scare yourself while it's hot outside, or it's just having to get these at the time?
It's just these are when the books are coming out. There's always a lot of horror novels that come out in like September and October, but there's also,
that makes sense.
But also people put out horror novels all year round. There's a company called Tor, T-O-R, that does a lot of science fiction and fantasy novels. And a few years ago, they started a subdivision called Nightfire that does a lot of horror novels. So they put out horror novels all year round. Because, this is the thing. People who like horror they like horror, and they don't want to just read it around Halloween. They want to read it all around, which is why you see like horror movies coming out in February and March and over the summer as well. I mean, like, I think there's a couple horror movies coming out this summer as well, So, yeah, it's easy to put things out, out around Halloween because everybody's looking to get scared, but
right.
want to get scared all the way around. And also, I would argue, horror is not just about scaring people. It's also about telling freaky stories and whatnot. You don't necessarily have to make people scream and go, like,
yes, it's not all jump scares.
Right. Yeah. So it's sometimes about being disturbing.
Carlos appreciates that you acknowledge the horror genre.
I like the horror genre. I don't like getting scared or grossed out as much as I used to as a kid, but like, I definitely do like reading horror novels sometimes. I just read two that were really, really good by a writer named Liz Kerin, Keran, which were these like really cool vampire novels. And what was interesting is the vampirism is a medical condition in the books, but the story wasn't told from the perspective of a vampire or somebody trying to fight vampires. It was actually told from the perspective of a woman whose mom was a vampire, and she was trying to protect her mom and keep her safe, like by helping her like live her life as a vampire, without being found. So those books are really, really good. I just finished reading them this week.
So guys, if you want to check out Paul's interviews about these books, as well as some awesome reviews and previews, go to paulsemel.com. The URL is here, but also for your convenience, linked directly in the description. So check that out. So let's get started with Star Wars The Acolyte, Season 1. We'll do our customary thread-sized review to kick things off. What do you got, Paul?
Okay, I wrote this down because I wanted to make sure I got it right. Though not the best Star Wars show, The Acolyte was rather interesting and has great promise for the future.
Interesting. I like it. I'm going to go with Star Wars The Acolyte is the most unique of the Disney Star Wars shows, with 3 Fs. Lots of fun, lots of fantastic fight scenes, and some notable flaws. I believe that does fit into threads.
Wouldn't that be 4 Fs?
Fantastic is an adjective. So,
okay. All right, just saying.
Yes. No, you're right though. So let's kick things off on a positive note. What did you like about Star Wars The Acolyte?
My favorite thing were the lightsaber fights, especially the one outside the Wookiee's house. Like, when they first fought the stranger, like that was just absolutely fantastic and on par with any that we've seen in any other show or movie. Yeah. I also really like the stranger as a character. I mean, we didn't get to know a lot about him, but he was definitely like that kind of cool, mysterious Star Wars bad guy that you get, like Darth Maul.
But also more layered than a typical villain.
He was, and there's actually some things that he said that this may not be the right time to mention this, but there was something very interesting that he said that I didn't know any other people talk about this. He was talking to someone and he said, "Oh, the Jedi would say I'm a Sith."
Right.
He didn't say I'm a Sith.
Right.
And if he was a Sith, I feel like he would have said I'm a Sith, because Sith is a thing. It is like, there are certain things that make you a Sith and make you not a Sith.
Right.
And I found that really interesting because I was like, okay, I don't think he's a Sith. I think he's like...
I never thought he was a Sith. Well, no. After, maybe for episode 1, but one of the things, if you're familiar with the scores of these, they used Kylo Ren's music for a lot of his scenes.
Right.
So maybe he's going to be a Knight of Ren.
They talked about him being a Knight of Ren, and there's been things in the books where the Knights of Ren come up well before, everyone thinks like, oh, the Knights of Ren, that was like Kylo Ren's like sidekicks, but actually the Knights of Ren like happened like earlier. They come up earlier on. So
would you please correct Carlos here? Because he did not say he was a Sith. He said what Paul just said. Now give us the quote again, Paul.
I am something that the Jedi would call a Sith or something.
Right. I
I
think he
don't know
said
exactly.
Jedi like you would call me a
A
Sith.
Sith.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Well, he was. He says he. We know that he was a Jedi, and
Yes.
so I think he may be something that we haven't seen officially in canon, because there's things in the earlier canon that have been since disavowed about there being dark Jedi. And
Right.
so he could be that. He could be just a fallen Jedi. He could just be a Jedi who quit.
I think they said gray Jedi are not canon, not dark.
Well, no, what they said is that dark Jedi were something that was in the old canon. So when the old canon got negated,
Right.
Anything that was in the old canon got negated until they bring it back. And the thing is, like, so this could be how they bring back dark Jedi, because we haven't seen any dark Jedi in stuff that is canon, including the books and comics.
And for clarity's sake, we're gonna refer to the old stuff as Star Wars Legends. That's like the old books, old comics, stuff like that.
Right.
There's a lot of I totally agree with you with the lightsaber fights. Although the one you mentioned on Kofar was probably my third favorite. I love the finale so much, the fight with Soul and Chimera. I thought that was so well done, and I loved Carrie Ann Moss's fight in episode 1. Both used wire work and a lot of
I forgot about that one.
Choreography. So
yeah,
it's just, to me, they were the best Star Wars fights for lightsaber fights that I've seen. I do like the ones in the prequels a lot, but they almost felt like too choreographed, like too intricate. I never got the sense that these guys are swinging at each other's swords instead of trying to kill each other. The ones in the sequels, they weren't skilled fighters, so they were kind of more raw and gritty, and it looked like they were trying to smash each other. But you also got a sense of, these guys suck. They don't know how to fight with lightsabers. So I think this was the best blend of both styles, where you had really cool choreography, but it also felt like really visceral, like they were trying to do some damage there, especially with Chimera. I mean, that guy just was like, you didn't even give a shit about collateral damage or anything.
Yeah. A couple other things that I really liked. I really liked the witches, and especially the head witch,
Mother Anasea.
Yeah, I don't remember the lady's name who plays her, but she's super cool and was really good in that role.
And gorgeous.
She
was a model turned actress, I believe.
Yeah, and she's been in a couple other things, and she's really cool. And of course May and Osha, the two of them. I really like them, especially because they were so different, but they were also just really interesting characters each unto themselves. So even though we didn't get to know May as well, but still.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit later in the show when we talk about characters we like, dislike, and all that. But I did like the characters in general. I thought the characterization was really strong and unique, very layered. We talked about Chimera being a very unique bad guy. I thought Soul was also a very interesting Jedi. Lots of layers, lots of flaws, but a good man with a good heart at the end of the day. And we had all these different kinds of Jedis, like Vernestra, who I always call her Lunesta, but I'll try to be proper. Let's call her Vern. Hey, Vern. So she was also interesting, mysterious. From what I understand, you read a lot more of the High Republic books than I did, because I haven't read any. So, but I've read a lot of synopsises and wikis and all that. But her portrayal in the Acolyte, she's kind of dour and serious and into the political game on Coruscant. And she's nothing like that in the books, from what I understand. She starts out as a typical Padawan. She gets kind of jaded and becomes a way seeker. So I'm really curious how she went from that, like a more heroic figure, into this almost conniving, manipulative kind of.
I think we're starting to see that in the books. I'm a little behind in the books. In fact, I got one of them today. Actually, I just got one today. I think we're gonna because there's still a whole chunk of them to go. So I think that we're gonna find out more about why she becomes.
Yeah.
How much of that is just her growing up and being more mature and being put in a position of authority,
Right.
and how much of that is things. Because one of the interesting things about the show as it relates to the books is a lot of the big conflicts that are in the books didn't turn up in the show. And I think that a lot of them are going to have been resolved by the time the show timeline starts.
Right. And for people unfamiliar with the timeline, the Acolyte takes place like right at the very end of the High Republic, a little bit before the prequels, and the book starts like 100 years or something.
So the first books are supposed to be 400 years before the prequels,
right?
Going up to about 75 years before the prequels, and the Acolyte is supposed to be 100 years before the prequels.
Right, and Vern is her race is long lived, so
right,
she's 100 and something in the Acolyte, so, and the books follow her younger adventures.
Right.
I liked the amount of firsts. We're going to talk about that more specifically later, but this show had a lot of things that we've seen in that we've read about in Star Wars books or seen in Star Wars video games, and I kind of, as it's really specific and ultra nerdy and possibly limiting, but I liked that we got to see all those things, hear certain planets' names, hear about certain materials. So I like that a lot of the legend stuff is being introduced through this show. I very much enjoyed that. How about flaws? Is there anything you didn't like or anything that bothered you?
I would say the things that bothered me were more about things that about specific characters that I wish had bigger and better roles. Daphne Keene is one of them. I don't feel like we got to see a lot of her, and she was so good in Logan and so good in those fight scenes. I mean, obviously that couldn't really happen in this, because one of the reasons she was really interesting in the Logan fight scenes is because she was this tiny little kid hopping around, basically kind of like Yoda when he fought Dooku in a weird way. I wish we had gotten to see more of her. And I also really wish we'd gotten to see more of Carrie-Anne Moss's character. In fact, I'm going to say something that you're probably going to disagree with, but I wish they had switched her and Soul. I liked Soul a lot. I thought he was a very interesting character. But I really like Carrie-Anne Moss, and I really like that first fight scene, as you mentioned, was super cool. I would have really liked it if she had been the one to survive and Soul had played her role, as the main of the four Jedi. But
let's call them. People are calling them the Brendock Four, like as if they're the Central Park Five or something.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's the one thing is I wish there had been more Carrie-Anne Moss in, like, maybe if she had not been like the first one killed, like maybe if she had survived longer.
Right. I mean, I wasn't expecting her to be in too much because she's expensive. She's probably the biggest star. I'm trying to think of who else is in the cast. No, I think she's quite clearly the biggest star.
She's the biggest star in that.
So stars are expensive, even in a galaxy far, far away.
True, but at the same time, she's not Julia Roberts.
Right.
I mean, no offense to her, because she's fantastic.
Yeah. There are different levels of stardom.
Different levels of stardom, and yeah, she may be the biggest person on that call sheet, but she's not a big star.
Right.
So,
I mean, she's a big. The Matrix is a pretty
but I don't
franchise.
Right, but again, she's not on the level of Scarlett Johansson or George Clooney or
right. But some of the things that I didn't like, the pacing and editing, I think that was probably the biggest flaw to me. The way it flowed, it seemed much better to watch as a binge than weekly, because some episodes moved quickly, some were slogs, some had a lot of details and added to the story. Some just had mostly action. I think the pacing could have been better. One of the sets, the Kofar set outside of Kelnaka's house, I thought looked really bad for a Star Wars show. Like some of it was like, you're clearly on a stage and not in this jungle. And I expect more from a Star Wars show, and the budget was high. So
right.
We see a lot of where it went in the finale, but I can see other places where maybe they could have spent more money. And lastly, some of the dialogue I also thought could have been better. As much as I love the characters, some of the writing didn't help them as much. It's hard to write kids and take them seriously, but that little conversation young May and Osha had where like, the Jedi are good, the Jedi are evil. I'm like, shut the fuck up. like go to your room.
Yeah.
There were some clunky lines, not a lot, but there were some that drew me out of it for sure. Anything else you didn't like?
No, not really.
Fair enough. This is
because one thing I think that helped me, because this might have bothered me if I didn't sort of have this attitude, is I kind of felt going into it, this is the first season and there's going to be more. And so when it ended the way it did, I wasn't disappointed. I know that like some people have been a little disappointed. They thought it needed a better, more concrete ending, you know.
Oh, wow.
Whereas I kind of knew like, oh no, this is the first of a larger story.
Right. It's interesting because endings for series like this, especially the first season, you know, you have to button up some things, but you also have to set up for the next.
Right.
And I thought they did it really
planning on there being a next. I mean, if you know there's not going to be a next, then you don't have to do that.
Right. But I thought the finale did a really good job at that. And I compared it to the Boys finale, which is live now. And I thought there was too much setup for the final season of the Boys and not enough closure for some of the issues. You know, on network TV, they do those mid-season finales.
Right.
And I thought the Boys was more like that. Whereas the finale, The Acolyte, I think it did what it was supposed to do.
Right.
It was satisfying, but also makes you wonder what happened next.
I'm going to go off topic for a second.
Yeah.
It's interesting to talk about endings because today we found out that Bob Newhart died.
Aha.
And the end of the Newhart show, the second one, is the last episode is regarded as one of the best endings to a TV series ever. Right. And every story that I watched about Bob Newhart's life and career today always mentioned that. Like, it was really interesting how like everybody mentioned like that last episode of Newhart. And
did they add like, as opposed to that dumbass J.J. Abrams who can't end anything properly?
No, nobody brought up J.J. Abrams.
I mean, it's tough to stick the landing on TV.
It is.
A lot of big shows, people complain about the finales, The Sopranos, Lost, Game of Thrones, Seinfeld. Yeah, it's tough to stick the landing, and sometimes it makes people look at the show differently. I do think Game of Thrones doesn't get as much credit as it should because some people were pissed off at the last 2 episodes and, you know, dismiss the hundreds, or no, maybe not hundreds, dozens of excellent hours of television that we saw.
Yeah. Well, I have a friend who actually, he went back and he watched all of Game of Thrones. Like, he binged it basically.
Right.
And he said that he did that after watching the last episode as it aired, him and his now wife. And he said that he didn't like a lot of that last season until he binged it. And then he was like, oh yeah, this is not out of character as we thought it was. Like, this all makes a lot more sense, like watching it in context. And I think I've heard that from other people as well, that like the end of Game of Thrones isn't nearly as bad when you watch it after watching all the episodes. So, which I need to do at some point. But anyway.
Yes.
So.
Now we talked about Star Wars Legends content, and there is a lot of references. some materials, some planets, some styles. So this really appeals to the hardcore Star Wars fan that's familiar with Legends, that played Knights of the Old Republic, read a lot of the books. Did it limit its appeal by having so much of it? The showrunner, Leslie Headland, who I applaud her for doing the Star Wars nerd show for Star Wars nerds, but also being, influenced by the video games and the Legends books and comics. Did that alienate some fans or limit the appeal of this show?
I don't know why it would, because it's the kind of thing, I don't see it as being something where people get like confused by it. Like, I think it's more like, if you go, oh, that's kind of cool. But if you don't know, you're just like, oh, all right, the lightsaber turned red. That must mean like they're evil now. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's more, I think it's more, it's kind of the same with like Marvel stuff, where like you'll pick up on little things from the comics and go like, oh, wow, that's cool. That's from Fantastic Four number 105. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? But if you don't know that, it doesn't sort of ruin things. Like they don't.
Well, let's use.
I don't think so.
Let's use cortosis as an example. Like I know what cortosis is from the books, but some of the people watching were like, why is the lightsaber shorting out on his helmet? So that could have confused people.
See, I didn't remember that from the books at first. Like, and in fact, like I was like, what? And I went and looked it up and I was like, oh, right. Okay. But when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's super cool. There's something like, I didn't realize it was the material in his helmet. I thought it was like some kind of like
his power.
Something. No, I thought it was like somehow his helmet was a device that did that.
Ah.
And so it didn't take me out of the moment of ruin. I was just like, oh Christ, yeah, oh yeah. Because then it sort of dawned on me like, well, of course there's going to be people that try to come up with things to
yes,
to deal with the Jedi and deal with the lightsaber. We've also had oh god, what is the material that the Beskar,
right? It can deflect,
also, right? Which, yeah, it does. It has a different effect, but it's the same kind of idea. So I don't think that like really irritated or annoyed people. I mean, maybe there was a moment where like, wait, what just happened? But then you kind of go, oh, okay, his helmet like can do something, and okay, maybe you don't know why it can do something because you don't know that it's this metal as opposed to a device or whatever. But it's easy to figure out.
Carlos asks, so is cortosis better or Beskar? Depends on the season. Beskar is more of a fall winter metal. And cortosis is a summer spring metal. At least that's what I believe.
Yeah, you're not supposed to wear Beskar after
Labor Day.
After Wookiee Life Day.
Yes. Another thing about the show that I enjoyed, as I mentioned earlier, were the first live action High Republic show, or live action anything. The first live action Wookiee Jedi. Some of these could be wrong, so correct me if I'm out there.
Well, the Wookiee Jedi was in the book. He's in the books. That's another character from the books. But yes, right. The first time we've seen.
Well, we've seen one in Clone Wars as well.
Did we?
Yeah, there was.
Yeah. But this is, I think, this is the first time we got to see one in live action.
Live action Darth Plagueis. That's first.
Yeah.
That's first true. Time we saw lightsaber bleeding.
Yes.
And it's funny. That's something that there's a bunch of Star Wars hardcore fans that hate this show for different reasons. And that's one of the things they criticize. Like, she didn't bleed it properly. She's supposed to be touching the crystal. But they literally show her touching the crystal. It's fast.
Right.
But, you're like bleeding the lightsaber, for people that don't know, is when a dark side user takes the lightsaber from a Jedi and corrupts the Kyber crystal, which powers the lightsaber, with their fear and hate. And that's why their lightsabers are red. So I thought it was super cool to see that. That was one of my favorite
Yeah, I mean,
happenings.
they could have shown her touching the crystal a little bit more just to drive that point home, but
She was in the middle of killing. So
yeah,
it's like,
you know, she's in the middle of she's not like she's gonna be like, wait, hang on.
yeah,
Om
excuse
Nom
me, can
Shivaya,
you wait a
Om
second?
Nom
I need.
Shivaya, Om Nom Shivaya. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah. Had to make sure this matched my outfit.
I mean, these are pretty cool firsts, all in
Yeah,
one
but again,
season.
I don't think, you know, for a lot of people, it didn't have the significance that it has for people that have
That's true.
read everything. But I don't think it, again, I don't think it really matters. Like, I think people were just like, oh yeah, a Wookiee could be a Jedi. That's super cool.
Yeah.
Like, you know, just because we haven't seen it before doesn't mean it can't happen. So,
And
although
another
I'm
thing,
cinching my fur.
so I believe, and this is another nerd book thing, but I believe one of the reasons that Kelnaka exiled himself is that Wookiee are not supposed to use their claws in combat. They consider that disgraceful. There's a word for it in Shiriuk, but it's like dishonorable to do that in combat, which sounds silly because I'm like, well, what the hell's the point? You have these awesome claws, use them. So they were saying that because he used his claws against Torben, that's one of the things that made him go into exile. I believe Leslie Headland confirmed this. She's been doing like weekly Zoom calls with a lot of the Star Wars YouTubers.
Right.
So, I mean, there's so many details in their conversations specifically for the book, the Legends nerds. But I think some of them can be confusing, but for the most part, as you said, it doesn't matter if you don't know them, but it's cool if you do.
Right. Right. I mean, again, I'll compare it to the Marvel stuff. It's like when a character shows, like a minor character shows up, and everyone's like, oh, it's like a barista, but like out there's like a Marvel nerd who's like, oh my god, it's the barista from Ms. Marvel issue number 5.
Right.
You know, he's on the Marvel wiki. You know.
Carlos adds, Osha also didn't really know she was bleeding it. Well, that's how I saw it. I agree that she didn't know she was doing it. Does it have to be an active thing, or can you do it unintentionally?
I think you can. I would think it would just happen unintentionally.
Yeah, you just get really pissed off and be like, God damn it. Hey, it's red now. But
yeah,
I just thought that was cool watching the saber, because that was Soul Saber, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because May takes it from him, chucks it, and then Osha grabs it. Now, I want to talk about a bunch of the characters we enjoyed, characters we didn't like, and characters we wanted more from. But before I get to that, just reminding the people out there, if you would like to support this channel, if you enjoyed this video, a lot of things help. Subscriptions, likes, all that good stuff. But if you really want to help, pick up some RPadTV merch available on Amazon stores around the world. For direct links, go to rpad.tv/merch. We have t-shirts, sweatshirts, phone cases, all kinds of neat stuff, bags, throw pillows, and more. Now, let us get back to the topic at hand. Characters. There's a lot of them. Some of them we wanted more from. Some of them, there was one I wanted. I'll save that. But let's start with the characters that you loved. Who did you enjoy the most in the Acolyte?
Well, as I mentioned, May, Osha, the Stranger, Carrie Ann Moss. I thought Kalnaka was cool. He's one of the people I would say, again, I wish we'd seen more of him, gotten more of him. You know, although I feel with him, to get more of him, they would have had to tell sort of a side story about him, and that would have, like, you know, been like sort of a weird tangent that they shouldn't have gone on. But yeah, those are the people that I think I most was drawn to in the cast.
For me, it was Sol and Chimere, and probably helps that they're both Asian men in these roles. That made me very proud and happy. But the character of Sol, as I mentioned, I just liked how layered he was. He wasn't, you know, the standard early Star Wars good guy that usually gets everything right. He is a good man with a good heart, but he made some really bad choices, and he let his desire for a Padawan contribute greatly to a really messed up situation. He acquiesced to lie about it. But at the end of the day, he's still really cool and has awesome fight scenes. And Chimere, again, also layered, ostensibly the bad guy, but he does some good things, shows some care for OSHA. Probably the first Filipino man that I've seen people talk about in a sexual way. So, they don't. I mean, in American TVs and movies, there's not a lot of that.
I know.
You don't see people. Yeah. You don't see people going that. I'd sure like to bone that Ned from Spider-Man.
They did talk about that a lot with the Crazy Rich Asians, the main guy,
right?
Who's really, really good looking. I remember that.
Snake Eyes. He's Snake Eyes also. Henry Golding. Yes.
Is he?
Yes, he was in that garbage Snake Eyes movie.
Oh, I didn't. Oh, he was in the Snake Eyes movie. Oh, okay. I thought he was the one in the other movies. I was like, that's not him. Yeah, I remember people talking about him as being good looking, but they didn't talk about him with lust in their heart the way they talked about Manny Jacinto when he took off his shirt. So
yeah, and yeah, I play in a lot of Star Wars subreddits, so just watching men and women be like, dude, that guy's hot. It's like, yes, those are my people.
See, for me, I know him from The Good Place.
Right.
And it's been fun watching people draw comparisons between his character in The Good Place and this guy. Because they're very, very different. I mean,
yes, one is the goofy amateur professional DJ, or is it professional amateur?
But there were people who were like his character on The Good Place was this, and this. His character on The Acolyte was this, and this. And it's like, are they the same person? And it's like, no, but that's very funny.
Yes.
So,
yeah. These people are actors.
Yeah.
They do different things.
Yeah.
I do think that's funny. Like, okay, Game of Thrones tangent again, since we are here. We talked about Game of Thrones earlier, and the actor that played Joffrey got so much heat from the fans that it made things uncomfortable for him in public when, he was buying groceries or whatever, because people hated that character so much. And there's another character like that in House of the Dragon, Sir Criston Cole, where so many fans really hate him, and he's a bad character. But, the actor Fabian Frankel, from the interviews I've seen, he seems like a really nice, goofy guy. And I hope he doesn't have the problems that Joffrey had. That would really suck.
I whenever this topic comes up, I'm always reminded of the episode that Brooke Shields did when she was on Friends, where she was convinced that she was
Dr.
convinced,
Drake Ramore.
Yeah, she was convinced that Joey was like Dr. Drake Ramore from Days of Our Lives, and she couldn't get it in her head that he wasn't. And he finally had to lie to her and be like, I'm Dr. Drake's twin.
Hans.
And Hans really and Dr. Drake is at this hospital 300 miles away. And she was like, okay. And then she ran out. I was like,
she was like, how can you be here?
Yeah.
And then Salem at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it has that great moment where everybody in the Friends cast, the
water.
They start throwing, they basically are like, he cheated on me, and throws water in his face.
And Chandler's like, and you left the toilet seat up.
Yeah.
Great scene.
Yeah. So I always think of that when I think
of
because otherwise you start to think about the people who got killed by their stalkers, and it gets
So getting back to the characters, I was surprised that you liked May and OSHA so much. Oh, I missed a comment here. Carlos liked Sol and Chimere the best.
Yeah.
So yes. I like Amandla Stenberg, even though I always trip up her first name and be like Amanda la 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 la.
Right.
I thought she did a great job with the material she was given, but I think it didn't help her as best it could. There's an interesting character and dynamic there, but I think some of the, especially towards the end, some of the changes were rushed. I remember when the first episodes dropped, we talked about some of the predictions we had from the show, of which almost all of mine were wrong, but they were just guesses. But one of the things I did say was that we were going to find out that Osha has evil inside her and May has good, which we did see, but it just seemed like the transition was kind of too fast. All of a sudden, like 6 episodes, we're used to Osha as the good one who's kind. Then all of a sudden, Chimera appears, kidnaps her, and she's all pissed off and using dark side powers now. I thought that could have been better. Was there anyone that felt flat for you, or you could have used more of? A lot of people wanted more Yord. There's a Yord horde.
Here's the thing. I thought Yord was okay, but I didn't understand. I don't understand what did you call it? The
Yord horde.
I don't get why. Like, people seem to think like he was the star of the show and the best character and those interesting. And I was like, why?
Well, like, he's young and handsome.
I get that, but he was also young and handsome on Chicago Fire.
But we don't usually get young and handsome Jedi that are cool. Like,
yeah, but I don't know. Like, his character just seemed to be kind of okay, whatever. Like he was the one character I was like, yeah, you could have gotten rid of him, or you could have like
they did.
No, I mean, like, get rid of him completely and give all of his stuff to Daphne Keene or something like that. Like, he just never really connected with me. I don't think, and I don't. That's not a criticism of the show, because not every character in the show has to be like super interesting. Because then no
one's interested. Yes, exactly.
So like he was just kind of your standard basic character. So like I didn't have a problem with him. I just didn't understand why there was this fascination with him when I'm like, these other people are way more interesting than this guy.
It's because he's young and handsome, which is, he takes his shirt off.
But I'm young and handsome and boring as fuck, and so nobody cares what I do.
Because you're not taking your shirt off when we do this podcast, so it'll help out.
Don't threaten me.
Lastly,
podcast being banned in 14 countries.
For characters, was there anyone you couldn't stand? Not just were indifferent to, but like really hated?
No.
I hated the one Padawan that would always be like, Master Venestra, here's what's happening.
Yeah, okay.
Like, I wanted something bad to happen to him. Like, can a monster eat?
He was kind of a putz, but I think he was supposed to be a putz.
Yeah, he absolutely was. But
and I'm waiting for people to get all mad and be like, Jedis are not allowed to be putzes. Like, of course they were putz Jedi. Come on.
Yeah, it takes different strokes to.
I mean, Anakin was a putz when he was a little kid. So
spinning, that's a good move.
Yeah.
Yes. I touched on this earlier. It's not on the sheet, but we did have some predictions. One of the things I loved about the series is that it was different, and that was a Star Wars murder mystery. And we didn't know what was going to happen. I love that about the show. Did things happen the way you expected them to? Were you surprised by things? I loved the element of surprise in this show. I don't know about you. Thought.
I remember thinking like that was only going to be like the beginning, and it was going to take like a left turn somewhere, and it never really took a left turn, although it did go beyond what I expected. But that's like but I didn't mind that. Like I almost kind of, I'm glad that it didn't take a left turn. And then in a weird way, in that last episode, it kind of did take a left turn, which we'll talk about in a second. We talk about the second season, but that felt like a natural left turn as opposed to like a.
I agree with that. As opposed to what the hell was that?
Yeah, like I kind of like because one of the things I was sort of worried about was that it was going to go the way the Boba Fett show went, where like you get to like you watch the first 4 episodes of the Boba Fett show, and then you get to episode 5, and it's like boink, like it becomes
the Mandalorian show.
It becomes the Mandalorian, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was worried that it might do that, and it didn't, because it didn't seem like they were setting up a murder mystery that was going to last 8 episodes. Like, it seemed like we were going to know pretty quickly like what was going on.
Right.
And
I mean,
and we did.
I read interviews with Leslie Headland saying how she was influenced by Rashomon, the Kurosawa movie.
Mm.
And that tells a story from 3 different perspectives. But the accounts are pretty different. Whereas the 2 flashback episodes actually, in this show were mostly the same. The happenings were mostly the same. Some of the changes in dialogue, I think, were too subtle. Like in the second flashback, there are some lines that are mostly the same as episode 3, but 3 or 4 words are left out.
Right.
And it changes how you would perceive that scene. And I don't know if everyone picked up on that. I think that was too subtle.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, it didn't make it seem like we were seeing, a fake version and then the real version. Like,
Right.
they call that an unreliable narrator.
Right.
In fiction. Like, we didn't get the sense that like, oh no, what you saw in that first flashback isn't really what happened. Like, it seemed like what happened in that first flashback is what happened. We just didn't see all of it.
Right.
And
I don't know if everyone imagined the flashbacks from the character's perspective, because in episode 3 they showed a pretty loving relationship with Mother Coral and the twins. Although she's stern, it was still clear that she loved them.
Yeah.
Now in episode, is it 6 or 7 was the flashback? I forgot already. But so episode 6, when they flash back again, Mother Coral just seems cruel. And this is what Soul sees. He sees these kids as being abused.
Right.
But he doesn't see the other lines that shows that Mother Coral cares. Or when they're doing the ascension ceremony, at the point where Soul watches it looks like something akin to torture. But he doesn't hear Mother Inasea's speech about threads and how that all works.
Right.
And yeah, it's almost racist that the Jedi see these women, this coven, is evil, whereas what did Master Andara call them? Like, unusual and strange. I'm like, well, to you, that's not your culture. So
right. Yeah, and we don't know what that ceremony would have ended in. I mean,
right.
Maybe they talk about the 2 of them being the same person in 2 different bodies. Maybe they were going to come together into a single person or something. Right. Who knows? I mean, we don't know. Maybe we'll find out in season. Well, no, I don't think we'll ever find out now I think about it, because everybody's dead. So
yes. The big Sith cover up. Yeah. I don't know if that explained. Did they explain it well enough, the cover up? So let us talk about season 2. Should we get one? Which I think.
Oh, we're absolutely getting.
Despite
that show did too well to not do one.
Yeah, it generated a lot of interest. Viewership was strong. I believe Andor was lower, and that got a second season. So
right.
Why not? What would you like to see in the Acolyte season 2? Would you like the focus to change? Any more characters you'd like to see more of?
What I think we're going to see, and I think this, looking back, this may have been the plan all along, is I think that we're going to see more of a connection to the prequels. I think that what they're really ultimately going to set up the Acolyte as is a prequel to the Phantom Menace.
Yes.
How long it takes to get there, though, I don't know. It could take 3 seasons. They could have a long plan for it. But I think now, especially with Darth Plagueis looking out from this little cave, and
he's a stalker. He's just like,
right. I do think that that's where this is going. Is that that you're going to have much more Plagueis in the second episode, and that ultimately you're going to meet like a young
Palpatine.
You know, whatever, I forget what is
Sheev. Yes.
I'll just call him Josh. You know, yeah, but you know, a much younger Palpatine.
Palpatine. No, I'm just kidding. From young Frankenstein.
That's what I think. But that's where I think they're going with it ultimately. I mean, what they will specifically do in the second season, I don't know. I don't know, but I think that's where it's going to ultimately go.
Right. So, I mean, a lot of the cast we saw is dead now, or the characters we saw. One that stayed was Master Vernestra. I would like to see more of her, partially because I really want to know why she's all angry. Oh, nice effect there. I really want to know why she's all bitter and angry now. I definitely want to see more of the lightsaber whip. That thing is just cool.
Yeah.
I want to learn more about her time with Chimere as the Padawan. So,
yeah, I think that's something that we're definitely gonna see more of.
I do hope they limit the role of Yoda, because Yoda was in the stinger at the end,
right?
And and Ki-Adi-Mundi was also in one of the Jedi meetings. I hope those are kept to a minimum, because I like how original this show was, and we're meeting new characters, learning different aspects of Jedi and Sith.
Right.
I hope that continues to be a thing.
I think if Yoda is in it, that he will not be a starring character the way he was in the prequels. I think he will be a minor character, kind of in the background, like just sort of showing up every once in a while and being like, oh, if you're going to this planet, go to this burrito stand. It's pretty cool. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think they want, and I think that if he does show up, it will be more when the series is closer to the Phantom Menace than now. Because the thing is, in the High Republic books, he's alive during that period, but he doesn't feature in a lot of the books. And in fact, in a couple of them, they're like, where the hell did Yoda go? They're like, oh, I don't know. He's off on a sabbatical or something. Like, he's literally like not around for a bunch of it. So
I hope it goes more into the machinations of the Jedi as well. As we saw in the prequels, sometimes the Jedi do some not so cool things, make poor decisions about withholding certain information, which was obviously one of the big points of this show, but also in the prequels. And then they make the rash decision to start a Jedi army that serves, the government instead of being religious peacekeepers.
Yeah.
Some people.
I wonder if like that. I mean, I wonder if we're gonna get to see like the, oh God, what was the Jedi's name who went and bought all the clones?
Oh,
Sifo Dyas, Master Sifo Dyas. Like, I wonder if we'll get to meet him. Like, I wonder if we'll see, Palpatine kill Plagueis. Like, I wonder if a lot of these things that we've heard about will kind of get figured out, and shown. I think we might get to see a lot of that stuff, and maybe even the time when Dooku becomes disillusioned from the Jedi Order. I mean, I don't know who you cast as a young Christopher Lee, but
that's true.
Good luck pulling that role off. But yeah.
Well, I mean, they take risks. I didn't think anyone would want to play a young Han Solo, but
true.
What's his face did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any races that we haven't seen in live action that you would like to see?
Can't think of anybody. I don't know. No.
You like what we have, or
no. I will say this. I hope that they don't have a jokey moment with Baby Yoda.
Oh, yeah.
If Baby Yoda is around, because apparently Baby Yoda is around at the time of the Phantom Menace. We just didn't see him anywhere. But
Now let's do this thing, and that I kind of dislike doing, but a lot of people like it. Where do you rank this on the Disney Star Wars shows?
Oh God.
So far? I mean,
I can do this. But we're getting to the point where it's too unwieldy for me. So I
or
would
just
say,
I mean, people are saying this is the worst thing ever. So what did you think this was
no,
better than?
Okay, if we're just, let's limit it to the live action Disney era
Yes.
stuff. So we'll not talk about Rebels or
no, because Rebels would be better
pilot.
than everything. No.
I would say my favorite is The Mandalorian, followed closely by Ahsoka, followed less closely by Obi-Wan, followed by this, followed by Andor.
Oh, wow.
The problem I have is with Boba Fett, because I liked Boba Fett. I didn't like the first half as much as I liked The Acolyte, but I liked the second half as much as I liked The Mandalorian because it was The Mandalorian.
Right, but even The Mandalorian, I don't like all of the seasons equally, for sure. I mean, to me, this is better. Book of Boba Fett was the worst for me by a pretty fair margin. So I like The Acolyte better than that. I like this better than Obi-Wan even. So we're very far apart on that one. And there's one season of The Mandalorian that wasn't as enjoyable, and that's purely subjective. I mean, objectively, I still think Andor is the best thing Disney has done for a live action series. Subjectively, Ahsoka is my favorite because I'm such a Rebels nerd that seeing those characters in live action was total fanboy moment.
Right, but I would also point out that like I liked all of these things, and the gradations between them are very slight. You know, it's like ranking like the first 6 Black Sabbath albums. Like, you know, it's like, yeah, okay, the first one is the best one, but it's like, you know,
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we have another comment here. Thank you for acknowledging Andor. I mean, Andor's an interesting one because it's the most un-Star Warsy of the live action Star Wars shows. You know, it's a political thriller. They shoot a lot of it on location, which I also think has a very different look and feel than the other shows. So many of the special effects are green screeny. But to me, from a technical standpoint, I think it's the best they've done so far. But I get why some Star Wars fans don't like it because it is the most un-Star Warsy of the Star Wars.
Well, it's also it's the slowest.
Yeah.
It's the most mature.
Yeah.
You know, it's also, as I've said before, it's the most 70s.
Yes.
You know, it really does. It's even more 70s than the original Star Wars movie that came out in 1977, as I've said before. So, you know, not every that slow pace.
Yeah. Yeah. It's too deliberate for some, and totally get that.
That's a good word. Deliberate.
Now let's get out of here on this. You've read some of the High Republic books. I've read none of them. I would like to read some. What do you recommend to get started, and what do you recommend because you liked it?
Okay. I think the obvious place to get started is at the beginning. Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule, which is the first adult one. And Claudia
That's how you
Gray.
say his name? I didn't know that.
I think that's how you say it.
He's Soule. He's French?
I don't know. I'm going to say he's French because it's cool. And then the other one that is in the beginning is Into the Dark by Claudia Gray, which was the first young adult. And I want to say something about that real quick because there's probably people who are like, ew, young adult. There are 2 types of young adult novels.
Twilight?
There are young adult novels that are written for young adults. And then there are young adult novels that are not inappropriate for that age group. And the thing in publishing now is young adult is a big thing. And if you say this is a young adult novel, that's good. And so the thing with Star Wars is there's never really anything terribly offensive in any of them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've read the middle grade novels. I've read the young adult novels. I've read the adult novels. there's not much of a difference between them. If anything, I would say the biggest difference is the length. Like the middle grade novels are basically like way shorter than the adult novels, but that's about it. And sometimes they're about kids. Okay.
And just looking at the cover art, just stylistically, it's just more. They have like more youthful art on the cover.
Yeah, a little bit, but what I'm trying to get at really is don't let the young adult tag discourage you from reading those books, because some of the best Star Wars, I mean, Claudia Gray's written some of the best Star Wars novels as far as I'm concerned, and hers have largely been put in the young adult column. But the reason I cite those two is that those are the two that started it all. And what's important to understand is there is a bit of setup for everything else that happens afterwards, but there's not a lot of setup. It's not like, okay, if you've ever watched like the long version of the Lord of the Rings, and like it splits each movie into two. Like, it's not like the first half of the first Lord of the Rings movie where it's like all setup and nothing really happens. It's not like the Phantom Menace which is a lot of setup, but not as much happens as it does in later movies. There is a lot of story there, and it's interesting. I would also say that Claudia Gray's Fallen Star is another really good one. Cataclysm by Lydia Kang. And then honestly, like the other ones by Soleil, Daniel Jose Older, and Justina Ireland are all really good. The only ones that I've been a little iffy on are, there's a guy named George Mann. I remain sort of nonplussed about his books. And there's a couple others that kind of go, oh, okay. And I've gotten to the point now, the problem is there's so many of them now, especially if you include like the comic books, that I'm getting to the point where I'm like, okay, I think I'm ready for this to kind of wrap up now. Like, let's
enough. Yeah.
But there's some really interesting things in there. Like one of the interesting elements that comes up more so in the middle bunch is, and they're exploring this, and I was sort of hoping that they would come up in the show, is there's like a cult of people who believe that the Jedi are bad because they use the Force, and you shouldn't use the Force. And when you use the Force, there are repercussions. Like, the Force should be free.
Right. Which is almost kind of like Chimera-ish.
Yeah.
He just wants to be free to do his thing.
Yeah. And there were times when I sort of wondered if that's where they were going to go, like if he is like kind of a remnant of that group. But there's also other things, like there's a very bad bunch of people sort of taking over, who again are trying to take over the galaxy, slowly from, Republic rule, and that's kind of interesting. And I think, but that's clearly been wrapped up by the time.
Right. Are those the Nihil? What are those guys?
Yeah. Who remind me a lot, like they're basically like kind of space pirates, and like they don't seem to, like, even though they have a boss, they seem to be very much like about themselves, like very selfish and about themselves, and dicks.
So it's like a network of tribes that hate the Jedi or the government.
Kind of. I mean, I guess you could kind of liken them to like the anti-government people that were especially much more popular in this country before 9/11 happened. They seem to take the wind out of their sails.
Yes.
But yeah, they seem. There's something in fiction that would be a good comparison. I'm just not thinking of it. Like people that are part of an organization, but they're also very selfish.
Right.
And like,
aren't those libertarians?
Kind of. But I mean, I'm thinking like how there's that whole thing in Klingon culture where like if you're the underling to like a captain on a ship, then like you try to kill the captain so you can become the captain, and that's how you advance in Klingon, like,
right,
military is by killing people as opposed to like by merit. So
right, they have their own rule of two thing going on.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So cool. I definitely will check that out and look up if that's how you say Charles's last name, because
I think so.
he's like we know him from the video game world. He used to write a lot of the old BioWare games and stuff like that, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, see, I knew him from comic books
and comics. That was the second thing I knew him from, and now he's doing these. So I'm excited to read more of his stuff. We have some interesting things coming up on RPadTV. We are definitely reviewing The Boys season 4. We are definitely covering Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yep.
There are some things that I'm interested in covering, but if you guys out there would like to see them, let me know. Paul and I are both going to watch Kite Man. We're big fans of the Harley Quinn show on HBO Max. Although
House of the Dragon
is up there too. Although, yeah, that ends sometime in August. Cobra Kai also. I'm a big fan of that. I believe Carlos, who is watching, is also a big fan. They split the last season, which is annoying. 5 episodes are out now, and 5 are next year. I want to say January. The new Time Bandits. I forgot about that. I'm excited and scared for that at the same time. I loved the movie so much. It was one of the most imaginative things. You know, I've always been partial to British culture, but I think that's what kicked it off. I'm like, and so this is a Apple TV Plus series coming out with its Taika Waititi. Lisa Kudrow is probably the most famous person.
The underappreciated, I think, Lisa Kudrow.
She's wonderfully talented.
Yeah. She is, but I feel like sometimes she's like underappreciated as a comedic actress.
Yeah, I mean, Phoebe was such a distinct character that she got pigeonholed, and not everyone can do what Elaine did and have lots of different shows. I mean, I don't even think Seinfeld is Julia Louis-Dreyfus's best show. I think Veep is phenomenal, but you know, of course, more people know her from Seinfeld because that's network, and that was the first thing. But yeah, let us know if you'd like to see these things reviewed. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Go to Paul's website. The link is in the description. And if you can't remember it, it's paulsemel.com. SEMEL. Not hard to spell. And we will see you next time on RPadTV. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.